morning sun glints off the dew-laden grasses of a pastoral landscape. Two farmers, Omar and his neighbor, work silently side by side, as they have for decades, their hands calloused from tending a land that doesn't belong to them, but rather to which they belong. And yet, a letter, sealed with the ominous markings of authority, has arrived. It speaks of borders, ownership, and legality, words that carry the weight of being both a weapon and a promise. But what does ownership mean when the soil has been nourished by the blood, sweat, and tears of generations unrecorded by the very systems that now lay claim? Here lies the paradox. Who truly owns the land? In this place where the land and the people seem inseparable, the concept of legal ownership feels at odds with the lifeways it attempts to define. What rights do these papers bring, and what truths do they erase? In this moment, we enter the world of land rights. A world where the paper-thin line between stewardship and ownership does more than demarcate, it divides. It's a question as old as human settlement. Who indeed determines the fate of the land? Walk the path of history, and you will find that land ownership once bore no legal mark. It was an understanding, tied not to documents but to oral traditions and shared stewardship. The Maori of New Zealand speak of Wenua, acknowledging the land as both mother and nurturer. Indigenous worldviews across the Americas held the land as a living kin, entrusted in care to its inhabitants, not to be owned, but to be honored and passed through generations. Yet, as empires stretched across seas, laden with pens and their doctrines, these ancient truths began to fade. Maps replaced the oral histories. A deed became more powerful than a lineage of stories or a lifetime of stewardship. Colonial powers carved lines across continents that bore no meaning to those who lived there. Their tools of dominance were not swords, but contracts and ink. In the Americas, rivers and mountains ceased to be mere features of the landscape, becoming instead lines of division. In Africa, colonial governors redrew the landscape with careless efficiency, the zigzag of a pen, and in doing so they sowed seeds of conflict that their descendants would reap for generations. This was not mere administration. It was an act of rewriting a lived truth into a ledger of ownership. The cost of this transition was steep, not just in the loss of land, but in the erosion of identities grounded in place. The very words spoken by indigenous elders, words of land as ancestry, of place as soul, were dismissed in favor of cold, unyielding bureaucracy. Now, standing at the heart of a sprawling metropolis, high above unyielding grid lines and impenetrable fences, it's easy to forget those original bonds. Nations, born of ink and ambition, have taught us to see borders where once there were neighbors, to see ownership where once there was life. Modern misunderstandings arise when someone who has never stepped foot on a place dictates the right to pencil out the invisible walls of property. So stark is this view that wars have been fought, communities displaced, and cultures fragmented. In our rush to categorize, we've fostered divisions. Men like Omar, grounded in the reality of their labor and love for their homes, stare at accusations of trespassing with bewilderment. Lawmakers, unseeing and unseen, dictate definitions from sterile rooms far removed from the earth's heartbeat. But there lies a truth that's newly emergent amid the clamor, the realization that the documentation does not account for essence. Deeds may delineate, but cannot encapsulate the spirit of the land. This realization brings about another question, one that reverberates deeply within. In pursuit of land ownership, have we not become rootless, adrift in our own lands? This is a realization that brings us to redefine what we value. In communities around the world, people are reclaiming the narrative, not of possession, but of shared care. In Bolivia, indigenous groups have won the right to administer their lands communally, acknowledging a truth only the earth can whisper: stewardship over control. As families reclaim land long owned by corporate interests, as farmers reshape barren fields into flourishing ecosystems, they defy the notion of sole ownership. Instead, they embrace a collective responsibility, one that promises regeneration and community building. Visualize this change, a patch of barren land transformed into a sanctuary of biodiversity by the hands of dedicated caretakers. Elders plant stories as they plant seeds, nurturing both soil and soul, ensuring that children learn the lineage tied not by papers, but by living memories. In cities where every square foot is priced and parceled, the shift is subtler but no less profound. Sharing economy models promote cooperative living, where the community reinvests in the very land it occupies, blending resources, not for profit, but for the survival and thriving of its members. This transformation invites a radical rethinking of legacy and heritage. Consider how history could be rewritten if across the world, the focus shifted not from owning, but honoring the transient custodianship that land demands. A mural painted by disparate hands does not lose its meaning to any single inquiry of ownership. Rather, it sings of stories coalesced into collective heritage. Standing before this possibility, we look not to the battle maps, but to the people, to the spaces between and beyond the lines. Here, the heartbeats of traditions persist. Here, the voice of truth rises, stronger than any deed. The land, unfazed by human folly, reminds us of an ageless wisdom, that what truly grounds us cannot be forged in ink alone. And so, as the sun dips below the horizon, illuminating a world both ancient and newly understood, we are charged with a truth that requires no pen to inscribe, that what remains beneath our feet is more than a possession to be fought for. It is a legacy to be cherished, a foundation upon which to build not walls, but bridges. The core question lingers, pulling at our senses and morality. What does it mean to truly belong to a land, if not through an acknowledgement beyond ownership, in a language written not by our hands, but by the love imbued through generations, unlabeled by our narrow definitions? This inquiry compels us to look beyond the simplistic maps drawn by political ambitions, beyond the grid lines that partition fields under perceived dominion. Instead, we are invited to explore the intimate rituals and sacred practices that have long been whispered across the winds and etched into the earth. These rituals and the stories they tell are the unwritten contracts between a people and their terrain, narratives woven into the fabric of native traditions, resonating with the very heartbeat of the natural world. As we journey deeper into the heart of this connection, historical records reveal communities not merely inhabiting land, but symbiotically nurturing it through sustainable practices, honoring the balance of ecosystems. Archaeological evidence points to the nuanced ways ancient cultures adapted to their landscapes, crafting stone tools and pottery that suggest not only survival, but deep respect and understanding of their environment. Their settlements, often aligned with celestial patterns, speak to their reverence for the natural rhythms that governed their existence. Moreover, oral histories passed from one generation to another reinforce a conscience that modernity often forgets. The land does not belong to us eternally. We are its stewards, its temporary guardians. It is in this stewardship that true belonging is formed, a bond that transcends possession, a promise to uphold the essence of the land for those who follow.